Hello and welcome to 55 and Better, helping mature workers get good jobs through an industry sector-focused approach. We are so happy you could join us today. My name is Jim Torrens of the Insight Center for Community Economic Development and the National Network of Sector Partners Initiative here, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I'm joined in our Oakland offices by Susie Smith, whom I'll introduce in just a moment, and also by Laverne Gardner, who's providing technical support to make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible. So thanks for your help, Laverne. Just a few logistics. You'll see a control panel at your upper right. You can shrink that by clicking on the button, the orange arrow, and you can bring it back if you need it by clicking on that button again. Audio for this session is by telephone or by streaming audio over the internet. We got a lot of feedback from one of our recent webinars that it was a hardship for people to pay for long-distance calls. So we are using the internet streaming audio as well as the telephone. You are in listen-only mode, but you can ask questions and make comments. And in fact, we really want those questions and comments. And you can do that by typing something into the questions pane that you'll see at the bottom of towards the bottom of your panel. So please do send in your questions and comments as we go along. We expect to get a lot of them, so the earlier you get them in, the better. You can also let me know if you have a technical difficulty or a question by raising your hand, and I will communicate with you offline. I do want to mention this session is being recorded, and links to the recording, the slideshows, and other relevant materials will be sent to you after the webinar. So don't feel you have to take down every word of what's said. There will be a record that we'll share with you after the fact. We have a great panel for you today, and I'd like to introduce them to you. Next slide, please. First, I'll introduce my colleague here at the Insight Center, Susie Smith. Susie leads the Insight Center's Building Economic Security for All initiative, which informs decision makers about what it really costs to make ends meet and who's struggling the most to make ends meet. And Susie has led the expansion of the Insight Center's work to include the economic needs of older adults, and has led Insight's collaboration with the National Council on Aging to create this concept of a mature worker sector initiative, which we'll talk about in today's webinar. So, Susie, thank you.
Pleased to be here, Jim. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Barry Lott, who is Director of Program Operations with the National Council on Aging. And as I just mentioned, NCOA has collaborated with us at the Insight Center to develop this concept of a mature worker sector initiative, and Barry's been an important part of that. Barry provides management and oversight of 11 NCOA senior community service employment program sites in 7 states. And for those of you who don't know the CSEP or Title V program, it provides training for employment through community service activities to low-income unemployed adults 55 and older. Barry is also a recent completer of the Sector Skills Academy, so he's got a combination of understanding of mature worker services and sector-focused workforce development. So, Barry, thank you for being on the webinar.
Thank you.
I'll introduce now Barry's colleague at NCOA, Roger Leahy. Roger administers the New Jersey CSEP program, which is currently serving 266 participants. And he also administered a program that we'll hear about later, which was the 502E Healthcare Workforce Development Project in New Jersey, which served 228 seniors over the age of 50, helping them connect with training and healthcare careers. So that initiative was part of the project that was profiled in a report that I sent those of you who registered before today, and that we'll send after the fact, but we'll hear about that later. So, Roger, thank you for being on this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Roger, are you there?
Yes. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. having a little difficulty hearing you, so we'll want you to speak up later.
I will. Thank you.
Great. We need to hear what you have to say. So next, I'd like to introduce Roger's colleague in New Jersey, Stephen Bruner, who's the president and CEO of Bruner Consulting and Training. And Stephen wrote the issue brief I just mentioned, and that was describing that healthcare sector pilot. You know, Stephen has over 40 years of work with workforce development and human services delivery, and particularly he's got long directed the local workforce investment board for 6 years. So Stephen, thank you for being with us and for sharing those aspects of your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, I'd like to introduce Ellen Schmading, who will be joining us later in the webinar. She's not able to join us yet, but she will be joining us later. And Ellen is the Assistant Deputy Director for Operations with the San Diego Aging and Independence Services, which is part of the Health and Human Services Agency there. And she oversees a wide range of services for older adults, really kind of an incredible range of services for older adults, anything you can think of, really. And she also played a lead role in convening workforce development providers and aging services providers in San Diego to address the challenges faced by older adults in the workforce. Something that, you know, we don't see that much of, this collaboration across the silos, and something that we hope that Ellen will tell us a little bit more about later. So she's not here to acknowledge our introduction, but we'll look forward to having her with us too. Okay, a quick word about this webinar. There's really been unprecedented interest in this topic, and we're just thrilled at that interest. And if you submitted a question in the registration process, thank you so much, because it was really helpful for us to understand what people are interested in hearing about and the questions that you have. That said, I want to be upfront about the fact that there are many of the questions that we receive that we just won't be able to address in this webinar. We're going to focus really on how organizations such as government agencies, community-based nonprofits, and educational institutions can work with businesses in the target industry sector to address the employment challenges of older adults and develop targeted programs to help, you know, connect older adults with good jobs. So if you ask about job search strategies for older adults or the impact of employment on Social Security benefits or other topics that are of great importance to mature workers, I'm sorry that we won't be able to get to those topics today. Maybe they're the topics of future webinars. That said, I'm really excited about this webinar. Let me give a little bit of background about the Insight Center and why this is a topic that's important to us. I know that you have reasons why it's important to you. So the Insight Center, for those of you who don't know, is a national nonprofit research, consulting, advocacy, and legal services organization that's dedicated to building economic health and opportunity in vulnerable communities. And we have seen the challenges to economic security among older adults, and we have a real interest in building economic security for older adults. And this initiative combines that interest with a long-standing history of promoting and supporting sector-focused workforce development initiatives, which we see as the most effective way to organize workforce development services. Through our national network of sector partners, we provide support for sector initiatives and also promote sector initiatives as a way of organizing workforce services. So this really represents a bringing together of several important strands of Insight's work. If you're interested in learning more about the Insight Center, you can visit our website, www.insightcced.org. And if you haven't done so already, you can also sign up for free updates on topics related to sector-focused workforce development at our NNSP site, www.nnsp.org. That includes notification of upcoming webinars. So We know, and I don't need to tell you, that mature workers are struggling. Here are some indicators. One recent statistic that's particularly telling is that as of March of this year, more than half of unemployed job seekers 55 and older had been unemployed for more than a year. So actually, if you can move to the next slide, please. Here are some brief indicators of just how difficult it is out there for mature workers. And if you're unemployed and you're an older adult, odds are you've been unemployed for more than a year. And of course, that's having devastating effects on the economic security of millions of older adults around the country. The flip side of this, and it is hard to see right now because there are still so many more job seekers than jobs, is that mature workers are needed in the workforce. Not only do many mature workers want and need to work, but without the continued growth in their participation, and mature workers have been the fastest growing segment of the workforce, there are just going to be too few workers to fill jobs before too long. Younger workers are just too few to replace the incredible wave, population wave that is the baby boom and baby boomers if baby boomers retire. So apart from that, mature workers have incredible value in the workforce. They often have skills and knowledge that businesses can't afford to lose, and characteristics that businesses value, like dependability, good communication skills, ability to work with others. So even in times of labor surplus like now, industries still need capable, skilled workers, and they have specific needs that our sector research methodology is designed to surface. There have been quite a few innovations in trying to help older workers connect with good jobs, and here are some. We did a scan of older worker initiatives around the country, and we were asking about what was working, what was innovative, and here are some of the things that we find, and they really are innovative. There are challenges, of course, remaining, and one of those main challenges is that a lot of the innovation in workforce services for older adults is happening on what we might call supply side. Supports very needed for older adults with the job search, with navigating the one-stop system, and providing peer networking and psychosocial supports, because the job search is incredibly challenging just for anyone. But there's, we think, more work to be done on connecting older workers specifically with employer needs that they might fill, as well as overcoming, as I mentioned earlier, Ellen Schematic in San Diego has helped to lead the siloed workforce development and aging services worlds. So lots of good stuff happening, but also lots of work to be done. We think that sector initiatives are, as I said, the most effective strategy for organizing workforce development services, and there's some good research to back that up. But if you're not familiar with what a sector initiative is, here are just a few characteristics that I'll flag for you. One is that sector initiatives are industry-focused. They identify a target industry and then develop deep understanding of that industry and the jobs within it, as well as strong relationships with employers in that industry. And it's really fundamental to the success of a sector initiative to do those things. I mentioned employer involvement, and that can range from planning assistance to governance to actually participating in delivery of training. The more employers are involved in all aspects of the program, the more we've seen that those programs are successful. It's a dual customer approach in that the needs of both employers and job seekers must be satisfied for it to be successful. And in fact, we know that in general to be the case for workforce development, that unless you're meeting the needs of employers as well as the job seekers, folks won't get hired. But it's intrinsic to the structure of a sector initiative that that's the case. And it's partnership-based, because no one organization can do all of the things needed to meet that range of needs. There's often a data-driven element, either in selection of the target occupations and industries or in managing program performance, so that there's a good amount of use of data involved. And there's often a larger goal of changing the way the workforce works for a particular industry and for populations within that. And those changes could involve creation of new training programs that create pathways into employment, changes in employer practices to remove barriers to participation by some workers, or changes in policies that affect the workforce system, the employers, and the job seekers themselves. This is a schematic that describes what a sector initiative might look like, and you'll see that on either side are the two constituents whose needs need to be addressed, employers on the one side and job seekers and workers on the other side. And there are lots of different roles to inhabit in this process that makes it a partnership-based approach. There needs to be some organization to hold things together and to aggregate the needs of both the employers and the job seekers. We sometimes call that a workforce intermediary. But training providers, support services providers, recruitment and outreach assistance providers, as well as, of course, funding support plays important roles in the success of this kind of an initiative. And the types of organizations that can play these roles vary tremendously around the country. We think that there are, at this time, probably about 1,000 sector initiatives out there. Some are led by community colleges, some are led by nonprofit agencies, some are led by workforce boards, some are led by employer associations, some are led by major labor management partnerships. So there's no cookie-cutter approach here, but we do know some things about what it takes to make the approach work. And I'll close just by saying that this approach does work, and that there's very rigorous research that has shown that it can be effective for low-income individuals, and not only that, but for specific populations within that category. So a random assignment study that was conducted by Public-Private Ventures involving more than 1,000 individuals basically asked 3 well-established sector programs to enroll twice as many participants as they needed. And half of those participants were enrolled in training and services, and half were told, we're sorry, we can't serve you, you're our control group. So the characteristics of the two groups were essentially identical, and they tracked the outcomes for those folks over time and found that those who participated in sector-focused training had improvements in a whole range of employment outcomes, most notably earnings. And those earnings, while they began relatively late because participants were involved in training up until a certain point, look very solid and as if they continue into the future. Over the 2-year period, those folks earned on average $4,500 more than those who didn't participate. And I mentioned specific populations like immigrants, ex-offenders, welfare recipients, African Americans, Latinos, and youth. Each subpopulation also showed significant impacts of the sector approach. And we'll send a link to this study for those who are interested as well. This approach has not been tested for older adults. And we believe that there's no reason why, if it works for those many other populations and has demonstrated such effectiveness, that it should not work for older adults. So we're very interested in piloting the sector approach for workers 55 and older. And what we're going to do next is hear a little bit about a pilot that's already been, in some senses, been done by the National Council on Aging in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. So why don't I turn things over now, and you can click on that arrow. Why don't I turn things over now to Barry Lott, who will take it from here and talk a little bit about NCOA's investment in this subject.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate the introduction, and we're very excited to be a part of this webinar today. Again, my name is Barry Lott, Director of Program Operations for the National Council on Aging out of Washington, D.C. What I want to do is give you a brief overview of current problems our mature workers are facing, efforts to assist them, and what is missing and not working in the mature worker space. Then you'll hear about an exciting sector initiative that took place several years ago. Next slide, please. For those who may not know, National Council on Aging is a nonprofit service and advocacy organization. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. Our mission is to improve the lives of millions of older adults, especially those who are vulnerable and disadvantaged. Next slide, please. The Senior Community Service Employment Program is one of the programs that we operate at NCOA. It is the only federally funded program devoted solely to improve the employment outcomes of older workers. We currently have 23 projects in 11 states. CSEP is authorized through the Older Americans Act and funded through the U.S. Department of Labor. It provides part-time work-based training for low-income persons aged 55 and older who are unemployed and have a total family income of less than 125% of the federal poverty level. Next slide. You all, I'm sure everyone, watches the news and reads the paper, and our country is in economic distress. Our older and mature workers are in a great deal of distress themselves. Through our 23 programs, I contacted all the program directors recently and asked them what are some new trends that they're seeing over the last year and a half or two that they may not have seen over the last 7 or 8 years. And some of the things that they're telling me are we're seeing younger, mature workers coming onto our program. We used to see those participants who may be 60 and above in age. We're starting to now see 55 to 58-year-old people enrolling more on a regular basis. We're seeing more seniors that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Many of this comes from people having to use their savings to take care of medical situations or, job crisis from not having steady income. We're also seeing an increase in participants with advanced degrees and solid work histories who have been laid off and unable to secure comparable employment. This group includes individuals with who have had incomes of $100,000 or more, people who have advanced level degrees, as well as entry-level skilled workers. We're also seeing more male participants compared to what we used to see. Maybe it used to be 80% female to 20% male. We're seeing a lot more males come on our program around the country. We're seeing a lot more participants who have been laid off in their early 50s and too young to collect Social Security. And we're also seeing a lot of mature workers who have a lack of basic computer skills. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to discuss a little bit about the problem that we're facing. We all know our country may be in the early stages of a recovery, but our economists are saying that once the downturn changes, that most of the future employment growth will be in jobs that require higher educational levels than in the past. This situation may put some of our seniors, our mature workers, in a situation where they may not be able to compete for a lot of the job openings that will be out there. Many baby boomers plan to work longer, and that's great because they have a great deal of experience to offer to the workforce. However, that may limit the opportunities and advancement opportunities for younger workers. Job seekers 55 and older have more difficulty than younger job seekers and are more likely to experience long-term unemployment. Jim mentioned that a little earlier, that we're seeing that mature workers are taking longer to re-engage in jobs than their younger counterparts. But the one thing that we're going to need is for our older workers to meet the new labor shortages that we may have. And their contributions will be critical and needed and necessary in the years ahead. Next slide. Okay, there are some current efforts to assist mature workers. I briefly explained the Senior Community Service Employment Program to you. We also have the Workforce Investment Act, which is, we're seeing a lot more one-stop centers and WIA boards assisting older workers and targeting their efforts to improve services to older workers. Although they are a required partner, CSEP and WIA, at times the relationship and the opportunities for senior workers are not as great as we expect them to be in certain locations, in certain areas. However, there are many other areas where mature workers are giving great opportunities, they're given training opportunities, and some are being hired by the workforce investment system. There's also the American Association of Community Colleges 50+ initiative. This is a initiative that benchmarks and showcases the most current and innovative programs at community colleges for workers who are 50 and older. And as Jim mentioned earlier, the NCOA Direct Care Worker Initiative, which we will talk about a little bit later when Steve and Roger speak about the process and some of the best practices that they got from the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so we want to know, we've taken a look at the whole mature worker system. We want to know what's missing and not working. There are some critical elements missing in working with mature workers. There are a few innovative efforts to support older job seekers, including moral support, counseling, navigation of the system, teaching job search, networking, and computer skills. So there's programs out there, but it doesn't encompass everything that's necessary to assist in making a mature worker successful in today's job force. Current workforce development efforts for mature workers are siloed, fragmented, and disjointed. There's really no systematic process in place to drive effective results. And that's why we're so interested in sector initiatives, because it is a systematic approach to providing opportunities and training and job placement for the mature worker, for mature workers. We have public training and skill building investments in older workers are rarely driven by labor market data or industry need. Basically, if we are not looking at the labor market information and specific industry needs, then we're missing everything. We're not paying attention to what the labor market is demanding and what skills our mature workers have. So those are some things that are missing and not working. We also have, next slide please, I'm sorry. Training and job placement efforts for mature workers often fail to consider pathways to economically secure wages and reliable solutions. As I mentioned earlier, many of our older adults are in dire financial distress, and we need to really focus on jobs that will give them opportunities to be more economically secure and to earn a higher wage that will sustain them through the remaining years of their lives. We also need strategies to engage employers and sell them on contributions of mature workers. This is one of the critical elements, and I think that Roger and Steve will be able to discuss some things that they did to make the initiative that they ran very successful. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to give you a little bit of information about the NCOA T2E program that was funded by the Department of Labor in 2007. It was a demonstration project to determine the feasibility of utilizing older workers to meet the increasing demand in a growth industry with high turnover rates. NCOA partnered with PHI, who's a leader in training and direct care worker in the training and direct care worker field. The initial project provided low-income seniors in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York with the opportunity for unsubsidized employment in a higher growth sector, which was the direct care work. The initiative went from a train and pray initiative to an intentionally industry and sector related strategy. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Steve Bruner, who will give you an overview of how the initiative started, and you'll then hear from Roger Leahy, who will speak about the actual process that he went through in New Jersey. So Steve?
Thank you very much, Barry. I appreciate that. Just so that everyone's clear, I was a consultant hired by NCOA after the process to take a look at exactly what the 3 states, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania did. So I want to give you a real quick, brief overview of the project. Barry mentioned that in 2007, NCOA received a federal funding grant from the U.S. Department of Labor to administer the 502E Healthcare Workforce Development Project in select counties in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. It was to foster self-sufficiency, to upgrade skills of mature workers, to place 300 mature workers into unsubsidized employment as community health workers. In addition, it was a demonstration project to pilot individuals who are slightly over income and 50 years of age. And this demonstration project was to determine the feasibility of utilizing these older workers to meet increasing demands in the growth industry with high turnover rates. The initial projects provided the low-income workers with an opportunity for short-term relevant training that could place them in unsubsidized jobs. Within 2 years of project implementation, the New York City Department of Aging joined the demonstration project to expand the service area. The 3 projects evolved over the 3 years very, very differently, and they came up with their own service strategies. In New Jersey, we used a try it before buying it approach. In Pennsylvania, they used a train-the-trainer approach, and in New York, they did a teach and employ, and I'll spend a little bit of time on each of those. The project's outcomes vary from state to state due to a number of things, adjustments made based on lessons that we learned, participant interest and aptitudes, ability to address some shortcomings. Some states also experienced challenges due to a lack of certification. That wasn't a problem in all the states. But no approach worked better in any area. All 3 programs had merit, and all 3 programs benefited and were beneficial to the success of the overall project. NCOA New Jersey Resource Center and the projects in New York and Pennsylvania were able to foster individual self-sufficiency and upgrade the job-related skills of mature workers. All parties put forth an outstanding effort in the 2nd worst recession in U.S. history. So we've got to remember during the course of this time, 2007 through, we were going through a tremendous recession. The job training program was funded to serve 300 individuals with a 90% placement rate. At project conclusion, the partners served 424 individuals and secured unsubsidized employment for 220 of them, for a 73% placement rate. The majority of those individuals were in long-term care and home care settings. Next slide, please. You can see New York and Pennsylvania, the 100 individuals were. In Pennsylvania, NCOA partnered with the CSEP sub-grantees to administer the program. And Barry already mentioned we used PHI to write a direct care worker curriculum. They hired a consultant to do a sort of a train-the-trainer program. Early in the project, the planning group agreed on an allied health training model, but due to the economic climate, length of training, and lack of jobs, it was abandoned for the train-the-trainer. Now here, employers were invited to a training session, and the OJT or OJE training grants were offered to those employers that agreed to attend the workshop and were willing to hire. Participants were permitted to remain at the training site to continue practicing their skills while the employer prepared for the job hire. Employers understood the benefits and value of the partnership, and they immediately signed on to participate. In Pennsylvania, they enrolled 91 individuals. 85 of them completed their training, and 35 individuals secured employment. Next slide, please. Okay. If we could move Okay, here quickly is the going rural in Pennsylvania. One of the things that we found quickly was that they changed the focus early on to go to a high-growth occupation titles within a specific industry. So you see the development, the evolution in Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. New York, as stated, New York City entered the demonstration program in July of 2009 with the advantage of the knowledge of the first two states. So they immediately considered the direct care worker training. NCOA established partnerships with New York Department of Aging to administer the CSEP section, and then they partnered with Partners in Care Foundation and Cooperative Home Care Association, a nationally recognized training program that prepared low-income individuals for full-time employment as home health care workers. So you see the single training provider in New York that also was the employer partner. This enabled all of the individuals to earn a credential, and then New York City Department of Aging placed social services, wraparound services with the older person to assure they remained on the job, and if they encountered any difficulty, they then, of course, had the opportunity to go back to the social service entity. So this was, again, another evolution, another creative kind of program. In New York, they enrolled 71 individuals. 98% of those completed training and earned a credential, and 66 or 94% of the program in New York secured unemployment, unsubsidized employment. And for New Jersey, we're fortunate to have Roger Leahy, who is the manager of the New Jersey, the National Council on Aging New Jersey Resource Center, to tell us about exactly how New Jersey works. So if I could have the next slide, please.
Good afternoon. Back in about 2007, we originally had a series of meetings that took place in Princeton, New Jersey, and a number of people from NCOA and a number of trainers from across the country worked on a very small internal project. And the original concept that we dealt with was something called a community healthcare worker. That original project only involved about 40 people. But we found out that after the training was completed, which actually went very successful as far as training goes, that the job title was relatively new, not clearly defined, and that it had neither state nor national certification. We sat down, we talked about this, we rehashed everything that we did. We looked around and we said, but there's a viable market in the healthcare arena. And at this point, we decided if we're going to do something, we were going to have to do it bigger and better, and we were going to need more money to do it. So at that point, we went about applying for a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor. In the latter part of 2007, we found out we got the grant, and then we were also, told that we had 300 people to train with a placement rate of 90%. We initially went in looking at this through a whole bunch of exploratory classes. We went in with people that we had here who had gone to some previous classes. But we found out there were certain things that we had to do. We needed tight control on this. We had a lot of money that we were handling, and we felt that this was so important that we needed people dedicated to working on this exclusively. The interesting part about CSEP is that CSEP is driven internally by participant staff. So when you talk about the wealth of knowledge, skills that the older worker possesses, everything that was done on this project was done by a staff I have here that I'm very proud of, and who really rose to the occasion on this with the amount of people that we trained. But it's an experimental project, so it was a learning curve. We had to learn a lot as we went by. We made mistakes. And as we made mistakes, we went back, we readjusted our thinking, we reevaluated everything that we did, and we restructured it. When we went into the allied healthcare field and looked at that seriously, that was something that we looked at before the recession started to hit. We trained people in those areas. The training tended to be on the more expensive side, and the training took a long time. And what was happening at that point was that when we were going to place people, there were other people with similar backgrounds who were out there who were also unemployed. Various companies were coming out and saying, we're only taking people with 1 to 2 years experience. We realized we had a problem at that point. So we had to reevaluate the situation again. Okay. Could you change the slide, please? Just skipping back for a moment. Going back to the part about restructuring, okay, and I think that's a critical part. The slide we're looking at right now is the community healthcare advocate, which I really went through already, about the no credentials, no jobs. But really, when we looked at the restructuring part of this whole thing, okay, we moved from community healthcare advocate, we moved over into allied health occupations. These were the occupations that were taking longer, cost more money, and where we were running up against people who had 1 to 2 years on-the-job experience. Again, we were running into a problem. We had people who were trained. We couldn't get them jobs. We had to restructure again. Training partnerships. This was something we had to seriously look at. Okay? We had to go where the jobs were going to be. Again, excuse me, staff that we were working with at that time had to go out into the workforce arena, deal with the employers who were out there, and find out, okay, in the healthcare field, where will the training pay off? Okay, at this point, we had come down to basically looking at fast-track, low-cost employment, and there had to be jobs at the end of it. This is when we actually modified the whole program around, and we went into direct care worker. And could you give me the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. Direct care workers. We talked with a number of employers in the state, and we found out some very interesting things from them. A lot of these companies had just started up. They were in dire need of employees. They were willing to work with us as a partnership, and they were particularly looking for certified home health aides. They were also looking for certified nursing assistants, and there was a little extra bonus in there. In the state of New Jersey, you have to be certified in order to get into any of these jobs. But particularly in the case of a certified home health aide, okay, the company agreed that they would hire somebody and that they would employ them for 30 days while waiting for the certification to come in, which gave us the opportunity to go in there with utilizing an OJE contract, get them hired, and then also after 30 days, they would get their first raise and they would move up into one of these other positions. What we found was that in spite of the recession, the direct care worker were the high demand jobs. By utilizing the employer, we had a vested interest, both of us, in the outcome that we were going to get. What we found out was if you look at the 80-20 rule on this whole project, the time, effort, and money that we put into it basically broke into the 80-20 rule. By doing it this way, we put 20% of our effort into it and got back a result of 80% as far as placements went. On the other side, we were putting 80% of our effort in and getting back about 20% on the whole thing. We have used this model now, and you know, we're very big advocates of it. We say you can replicate this across the board. Sector initiatives, incredible. If we would have known Jim and the group over at Insight back in 2007, we might not have had to learn things the hard way. But like I said, you do learn by your mistakes. And, we did learn them. We took them to heart, and we, adapted as we went along. So, it's like it works. It works. It produced results back then. It produces them now. Slide here. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we got it. That's the one. And this was mentioned earlier. We did train 228 mature workers. And this is where the 80-20 comes in. 80% were probably trained as certified home health aides. 119 people were actually placed. It took so much less effort to get these people jobs than it took to get the other 20% of the people jobs. When the 3-year project was over, some of the other people were still looking for jobs out there because of the recession. It still hadn't gotten to the point where we could get them hired. We've included a page in here. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, participant profile. This link, if you'll follow this link, it will lead you to one of the graduates that we have from the 502E project. And I think it's a great story. No matter what you say, about the particular field that we're in, the particular field that we do, I don't think there's anything that matches the feeling that you get when you've helped somebody reestablish themselves, regain their self-esteem, get their life back on the right track, give them control back of their life, and get a job. And I think that's the ultimate reward that really comes out of this whole thing. But I think this is a great story about a lady named Pat Laudieri. And I hope you get the opportunity that you'll take a look at this and read this. We've also included another link on here if you'd like to read the entire white paper to get some more information to see exactly in depth how much work went into this. Best practices in New Jersey. Next slide. All right, there we go. As I said before, and I'm going to make this short, we made a lot of mistakes, and you learn by your mistakes. And what comes out of that is usually the best practices, and you know how to navigate through in the future. But if there were best practices in New Jersey, I have to say one of them that you learn very early is fully investigate all the options that you're going to be dealing with. Make sure you understand what the reality of the situation is. Particularly when you have money for training, everybody wants to talk to you. They all want to be in on it. And it goes back to the old saying that we have coined here, check to make sure you know what the motives are of all people involved. In our case, fast track, low cost, high placement. Make an impact on somebody's life. Over these 3 years, we've formed some very good, strong partnerships. To this day, they last, they work well. Carefully screen your candidates. And we found out the hard way on this too. What's their motive? What do they really want with the training? The ones who were there, and particularly the ones who were in CSEP, a lot of them did very well. A lot of the people that we brought in from the outside, though, were more interested in going back to school for the sake of going back to school and having a diploma. The people that were in our program really needed to get their lives back together. And utilizing a sector initiative, particularly the way that we've done it here, you're giving the employer a chance to see the participant's ability to perform on the job. And I think that's important. That covers an awful lot of ground that we couldn't cover in other areas, like you have 1 to 2 years experience. Well, in a case like this, that employer is going to know within the training cycle if this person's going to fit in with them and if they're going to become a valuable employee. So at that point, I'd like to thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Steve.
Could we have the next slide, please? Quickly, you can see several things happened in the whole project that makes the best practices. And what I need to say is, regardless of the industry, a model that has a good job candidate that has a good employer partnership that then does the training is one that can be replicated across other clusters, other sectors. So green jobs, IT jobs, whatever, this model that we're talking about here can be used. The try it before we buy it idea of the employer actually doing the training, seeing the job candidate on the job, and then, of course, having the opportunity to hire that individual. Needless to say, whichever industry you're in, you need to have them involved. Employer partners are very key. You need to, of course, nurture them and bring them along. The training we found had to be short-term and very relevant because the allied health field that we were talking about, which was long-term training, and then the older people who need the dollar immediately, and then they don't find a job at the end, it became very, very, very difficult for them, and that's why we stay with the short term. The benefit for the industry focus, again, you have the opportunity to address a whole cluster. And the continued support. In New York City, we saw this, the idea to have wraparound services to assist the older person because they do experience difficulties on the job, having the ability to have someone intercede maybe with transportation or something along that line, that support became critical in New York, and it was a best practice, something we learned. So quickly, turn it back to Barry.
Okay, thank you, Roger and Steve. Next slide, please. I'm not sure. This is the website address of the white paper. If you could jot that down, I think this presentation will be available at some point per Jim's prior comments. But if you could go to the next slide, I'd like to close this up because we have other people that need to speak. Some of the things that we do know from this initiative, as well as my recent attendance in the Sector Skills Academy by the Aspen Institute, is that sector initiatives can be highly effective. The work that New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Roger and his staff did was pretty amazing work for a mature worker group. We need to be realistic and set achievable goals and understand that the industry, academic and employment, and understand the academic and employment requirements. You know, there has to be research done. As you heard Roger say, they learned a lot of things the hard way. And, you know, although that happens, you know, we definitely need to make sure that when we're implementing sector initiatives that we set achievable goals and understand the industry that we're getting into. Most importantly, we need to revamp workforce policies and programs away from the outdated train and pray model, more to an intentional industry or sector strategy initiative. We thank you for listening to our presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Roger and Stephen, too. I do want to echo what you said, Barry, just now, that we will send those links to the report, to that profile of a participant who really benefited from the New Jersey and NCOA project, as well as to the recording of this session, the slideshows, and to any other supporting materials that are referenced. That will come out sometime after this webinar, either tomorrow or early next week, and everyone who registered for it will receive that. It will also be posted on our webinar archives page on the Insight Center website. And I wanted to also mention something that Cal Halverson of Civic Ventures brought up. Barry, earlier you mentioned that the American Association for Community Colleges has a +50 initiative on helping increase completion and improve services for older adults in community colleges. And there is a grant competition for interested community colleges. It's the AACC +50 Encore Completion Grant process, and they're now accepting applications. So community colleges that are interested, those applications are due June 22nd, and thanks to Cal, I have the link and will include that in the follow-up as well. I also want to mention on the slide that showed some aging workforce practices or initiatives that there is one important initiative that wasn't mentioned that I want to flag. The Aging Workforce Initiative is an ongoing 10-site project supported by the U.S. Department of Labor with support for technical assistance from Atlantic Philanthropies. Amy Sherman from the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, or CALE, flagged it for me, and she's, of course, very close to that because they are technical assistance providers to those sites. And I think it's important to say that some of those sites had target industry sectors, not all did, and that many of the innovative practices that I mentioned were practices that those sites either developed or employed. So they're doing a lot of good work with a focus on helping older adults, particularly within the context of the one-stop system. We think that this is a very complementary set of services and approach, and we'll include information about that initiative also in the follow-up to this website, to this webinar. So thank you, Amy, for flagging that omission. There were a couple of questions that came through, and I want to ask them. One was early on, Barry, you talked about CSEP, and obviously a lot of this is happening potentially in connection with CSEP. And this question is from Michelle Talley, who asks, she says, I thought CSEP just lost a lot of funding. Is this program still viable? And then in a follow-up, how many hours per week is CSEP offering? So, Barry, do you want to sort of let us know a little bit about the status of CSEP these days and how it's happening?
Sure. To answer the question, first of all, yes, CSEP did see pretty significant cuts last year. The ending of the ARA money came on June 30th, and we lost about, I think, additional 20 or 25% of funding. However, what we look to do with the sector initiative at NCOA is utilize some of the training dollars that some of our programs have. We have to be really strategic in what cities and what locations we decide to launch these initiatives. But the one thing I've learned is that you want to do your research to take a look at the area in which you want to start a sector initiative, because if there are already sector initiatives being done by other organizations, then I think it's best to probably work with those organizations to try to get our mature workers a space in that initiative, because we can bring our own training dollars to the situation, which is a pretty unique situation. And Jim, what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
Well, so let me just, so you were just now talking about the potential for CSEP to partner in the implementation of a sector initiative, because CSEP has some assets that could be really beneficial to participants in a sector initiative. Is that right?
Correct. That's right.
Okay. Well, the other part was just about how many hours a week CSEP is offering. I think this is connected to the idea that CSEP lost a lot of funding. I heard nationally that it was 45% cut, a cut last year, and given those cuts in funding, have the hours of participants been affected?
Well, it really depends. I mean, there are 18 national organizations that run CSEP programs across the country. I can only speak on behalf of NCOA. We have 23 programs, and we probably have about 20 to 21 programs that have been enrolling for some time. Even though the budget cuts did affect us, we were able to manage our caseloads, help people get jobs, and increase our hours back to 20 hours pretty much across the board with most of our programs.
Okay, thanks for that. I should also flag that, and I don't know if it's happening today, but the U.S. House of Representatives is doing a markup on the on one version of the Workforce Investment Act reauthorization, and this particular version eliminates the CSEP program from funding. So for those who are interested in the status of CSEP and its funding, you should pay close attention to the reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act. And that is a process that is happening now.
We're just muting that background noise.
Sorry about that. That was pleasant, wasn't it? Okay, and you know, I think that we definitely have some other questions and comments, but we will hold those until after our next presenter. We're going to hear now from Susie Smith of the Insight Center about how we've been involved in developing a workforce, developing a sector approach for San Diego. So,
thank you, Jim. So we are really excited because we got an opportunity to try to pilot this model and build off the lessons from NCOA in San Diego. And what we found, we chose San Diego because there was a high proportion of older adults, and there are many that were unemployed and high needs. And we also had an interesting willing partners that were really bridging some of the silos between workforce and aging already. And there was a coalition in San Diego already sort of working to kind of break down some of these silos. So the work that I'm going to be talking about today is sort of the research and development stage, that first stage in the sector initiative before you go into program implementation, so that you can kind of, rather than learn along the way, try to have some of that data and that research done up front and have very intentional programming. And the results of the research that I'm talking about are in a report that we have a snapshot, a screen slide of, and you can find on our website called Helping Older Thrive, Helping Older San Diegans Get Good Jobs Through an Industry Sector Approach. Next slide, please. So in terms of the research process, typically a research process for sector will involve an advisory board because we want to have a local group of people that really spans the different areas, from the local area agency on aging, the community colleges, to the workforce investment board, employers. It's really important to have them at the table from the beginning, and service providers. And the advisory board helps in a variety of ways and makes decisions along the way in terms of helping decide which sectors, which occupations, who are the key partners that should be involved. The next step is to do that labor market information research. And so that's where we see what are the growing sectors within your region that can actually be a good fit for older adults and that provide decent wages without a whole lot of training. So we did labor market research which focused on our selecting healthcare as an industry sector to focus on in San Diego, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But the next stage is then to have interviews or focus groups with a set of employers that can either confirm, verify, tweak what you're finding through the labor market research. And here you really want to find out what is it that's keeping employers, HR people up at night. Even in times of labor shortages, there are still employers that need to find high qualified employees. And so you really understand what are the upcoming trends, in this case of the implementation of Affordable Care Act, that are going to impact their workforce needs. So we interviewed 10 hospitals, 10 different employers, hospitals in the San Diego region, community clinics, and home care agencies. Next, you want to do job seeker focus groups. Here we did 3 job seeker focus groups to understand both the challenges and the attributes that older adults will bring to the labor market. We had one group with a local one-stop, so we had job seekers that had already been visiting the one-stop, another focus group with PSEP participants in San Diego, and then a third with a community-based organization. You also want to do a scan of the local support and employment services already within your community to understand what training currently exists, what are the supports that currently exist, and how can we coordinate those in an effective program. Next slide, please. So in selecting the target industry of healthcare, we look at 4 factors. We look at growth. We obviously want to make sure that there's significant growth in that sector. We look at the wages to make sure that they pay decently. And as I mentioned, short-term training. We want to make sure that, really less than 6 months in this case is what we found with the mature workers we spoke with these, or the maximum amount of time they would want for training. And you want to make sure that the sector in general tends to be conducive to older adults, that you look to see how many older adults are actually employed in the healthcare sector and in different occupations to see if they in general seem to be receptive. And then finally you look at mobility. So we did that, and we found healthcare was a good fit, had a good mix of jobs, strong growth. A lot of them were well-paying. There was opportunities for advancement. They were strongly interested in hiring mature workers. And they were really concerned about the quality of their applicant pool. While they had many, many applicants for the jobs they had available, often they had a hard time sifting through those many applicants and finding who were the really qualified candidates. Next slide, please. When we took a deeper look at what the needs and attributes of mature workers are through our focus group, we found some really interesting findings. First, they were quite interested in healthcare, and they had a real interest in professions that were giving. They wanted to be able to contribute their skills and experience and help other people in some way. And they felt they had a lot still to contribute. They had a lot of experience. They had a lot of judgment, common sense, good communication skills. They wanted to work for the social aspects of work, too, of being able to go into an office or go into a work setting and have that day-to-day social interaction. And obviously, and most importantly, for many, they needed to work. They had been unemployed for a long period of time. The average in our focus group was 2 years of unemployment. So they really desperately needed to work, and many were in that sort of that catch where they were not yet eligible for Medicare or Social Security, but it was really hard getting back into the job market. They preferred some flexibility in terms of the work schedule and the hours. Not all wanted full-time work. Some needed flexibility. And some of their concerns included just getting a foot in the door. They felt that if they could only, get the foot in the door, give them a chance that they would be able to show how valuable they are. And what they found is that there was, not surprising to many of you on this webinar, I'm sure, there was a lot of discrimination in the hiring process. We talked stories about how they seemed really interested, they were excited on the phone, they got in the door, and suddenly the HR person interviewing them saw the gray hair, and the tone changed, and they started saying, I'm not sure if you'd be a good fit, if you'd fit into our environment. And so they talked a lot about how discouraging that was when they saw the discrimination, or they said you're overqualified. And in terms of some of the challenges and the skills they needed, many had not been job searching in a while. The process has changed. All the applications are online. Many weren't involved in kind of social networking, and so they really needed some updating in terms of their skills for job search processes, as well as computer skills, which we all know is critically important. And then finally, they felt that they were being compared to younger workers, and there was the stereotype that maybe they wouldn't want to invest in them because they had a shorter span potentially in the labor force. So on the next slide, we talk about home care. So within the healthcare sector, the two occupations that we focused on was one, home and community-based care, so direct care has been referred to previously, and then the other was patient access representative in the hospital setting, and that's your sort of hospital greeter. So I'll talk briefly just about home care, and what we found is there's tremendous growth in the home care within this region, and several employers said that they were going to be doubling their labor force in the next year, that they were really having a hard time finding appropriate workers, and that they really valued older adults. I mean, what they said is that when you have an older adult coming into the home of a more frail elderly person, there is a different kind of relationship that's formed. I mean, they're not texting on their phone every 2 minutes. There's, there's a sense that they're very present, and often older adults already have experience caring for other people. So when we looked at sort of all the pieces, wages, we found that while many home care jobs do not pay particularly well, there were some that paid higher, and we sought out those home care agencies that seemed to do what we're calling the high-road home care agencies, where they did pay higher wages, closer to the $11 an hour mark, where they offered some stability in terms of the number of hours that were provided, and benefits. And we thought if we could elevate those home care providers, and if we could make a case that, yes, you can provide quality jobs for older adults, in this industry that the growth is so high that it would be assistance or be a nice example in systems change and start changing some employer practices. The training was short term, so that was a positive. But I think it's also important to know that this is not a job for every older adult, and that the physicality involved in some of the home care jobs would be more difficult than some older adults could handle, understandably, but the home care agencies talked about how there was this matching process where they would look to see what are the needs of the person that needs care, and what are the needs or what are the abilities of the person that is employed with them. So there'd be a match, so they could find some matches that would work. So in terms of, on the next slide, some program design considerations. We've already talked a lot about sector initiatives and the principles. I'll just briefly say here that employer involvement from the beginning, so that's why employers on the advisory board are really important, and employer involvement in developing the training. And so the occupation-specific training is incredibly important. And what we find through these programs is that in the end, the employers are not hiring them because they're old or because they're young or because they have one characteristic or another, but because they are trained to the specifications that they need. And that is really critical. So when you get the employers involved in the beginning, that's how you make sure that your training is really meeting their needs. Previously was mentioned the rigorous screening of participants. I mean, you need to make sure that it's the right match and that the older adult has the support services in place so that they actually are ready to go to work. And part of that is doing that navigation of what are the support services within your local community and making sure there's some intensive case management that can help get them access to those services and navigate with often a sort of fragmented aging network. Promising practices. Just very briefly from the scan we did before, we've already mentioned the importance of try before you buy internships, and that was just echoed with the focus groups we did where we saw older adults saying that when they got a foot in the door, then they could get a job. But peer networking and support is critically important. There is just given all the discrimination that older adults are facing in trying to get back into the market, it's really important to have that support and to be able to learn from one another through the process. And I think we found that for retention that's in the job, that's also critically important. In the next slide, I just go through what a little bit of a program flow would look like. I'm actually not going to spend time on it. It's just a visual you can look at. What I'd like to move on to is actually what you would need to do in your community if you're trying to figure out, is this something that might make sense where I am? And if you're going to start one of these initiatives, the first piece is doing this analysis of the regional labor market to understand where's their growth, is there growth, and if so, where is it that would be suitable jobs for an older adult, so that you don't sort of learn the lessons in retrospect as NCOA had done. And then importantly, the capacity to understand and meet the needs of older job seekers. And you might be a workforce person that serves populations in general, but that doesn't have a particular expertise in older adults, and that's fine because then you could partner with another organization that really brings that expertise around what older adults in particular need. Similarly, the ability to understand and meet the needs of employers in target industry. So the ability to be able to speak to employers credibly, to build relationships, to understand their needs, and in some ways it's a different skill set than social service workers in general. It's a different kind of approach. And again, I think the partnership is really important because, as Jim said earlier, no one organization is going to be able to provide all of what you need in order to have an effective sector initiative. Finally, you obviously need funding and ideally policy support for this kind of approach. We found, just to give a ballpark, the sector programs tend to cost about $5,500 per person, and there's a big range, and some sector initiatives are much more, but that's what we found as a minimum for developing an effective partnership. So briefly, on the next slide, since as I mentioned, this phase we sort of just completed the research and program development. We're now working with local partners to secure the funding for the next stage of the work, which is obviously implementation, but we wanted to give you a sense of what this might look like. So I want to introduce to you the fictitious Thrive class of 2012, and so that you can get a sense of what the impact would be. So meet, congratulations to Jorge Salazar. On the next slide, he's a laid-off truck worker. He had exhausted his unemployment benefits at the age of 61. When we did some benefit screening, we found that he was actually eligible for SNAP, formerly food stamps. So we got him into food stamps. And we did a comprehensive economic case management assessment, and we found that he was behind on his rent, but we were able to get him referred to legal services providers so that he could stay in his house a little longer while he completed his training and then was able to pay his back rent and remain in his home. He was trained as a home care provider in our fictitious example through the partnership, and was employed at Elder Care Guides, earning $11 an hour, and now loves to work with seniors. And then another example, Etta Baker, she's a CSEP participant, 63 years old. She was able to receive a stipend while getting trained through CSEP so that she could actually have some money to get through the training. Benefit screening resulted, she's eligible for EITC, earned income tax credit. And she was trained as a patient access representative and was employed at Scripps Health, which was actually rated #1 place to work in the nation for older adults by AARP, and has been on AARP's top 10 list for the last 10 years. And she's earning $14 an hour. And then finally, we talked a bit about systems change and how this can result in some systems change and better practices. I just thought I'd give examples of what those kinds of system changes might be. So one is new partnerships being formed between aging and workforce development organizations, as well as new training dollars. So obviously the Workforce Investment Board and the one-stop, they have access to training. They're not always effectively funneled to community colleges, but one of the things we're working on with our local coalition in San Diego is how do we get those dollars funneled to community colleges and customize a training program for older adults. So other examples of systems change is having elder care guides lead efforts to improve quality of home care jobs so that we can set up these examples and do some PR to say, look, you can do this too in terms of being a good employer for older adults. And initiating some employer dialogues that highlight the value of mature workers in the workplace, because there's a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions about the cost, quote unquote, of older adults, because some say that the benefits, it costs more because of the benefits. There's a lot of misconceptions, however, out there, and I think one of the things we could do is highlight the value and try to debunk some of those myths. So on the last slide that I have, I just wanted to briefly mention some of the expansion goals that we hope to have with this project. We are hoping to be able to develop the project across the country in different regions. Ideally, we'd like to have 500 participants so that we can prove that, yes, sector works for older adults just like it works for other populations, and that we can start making the policy systems change case, that we want to make perhaps some tweaks to CSEP to make it an even stronger program. Perhaps if you get the Department of Labor and the WIDS to recognize older adults as a vulnerable population, that then to get some special funding for them. We're hoping to improve and better connect these different systems, aging, workforce, human services, and build the capacity both of aging services providers to be able to do this kind of approach, as well as workforce development agencies to understand how to uniquely serve the needs of older adults. We have policy and system change goals. We want to promote and sustain the model over time, and I already mentioned some of those. So finally, before we turn it over to our last speaker today, before we turn it over to questions, I just wanted to introduce again our last speaker of today, and her name is Ellen Schematic, and she is from the local area agency on aging and independent services in San Diego. And I just thought, Ellen, while we have you could just mention why you thought this was an important approach to bring to San Diego, how this connects to some of the work that you've been doing through the Mature Workers Coalition, and what you hope to gain.
Thank you, Susie. I'm not sure if everybody can hear me. This is Ellen Schematic, and I'm with the Area Agency on Aging, which is known as Aging and Independent Services here in San Diego County. And we have been, can you hear me? Just confirm that if you will.
Ellen, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I just want to confirm that before I keep talking to myself.
Sure.
At any rate, I just wanted to share with you that we first formed a Mature Workforce Coalition back in 2006. At the conclusion of our Aging Summit at that time, we had a goal to increase community awareness by linking employers, recruiters, educators, and mature workers, and to encourage organizations to develop resources and services. We brought together partners from AARP, our Workforce Investment Act funder, San Diego Workforce Partnership, the Community College District, Human Resources, Jobbing.com, a local entity that provides job assistance and search, as well as our CSEP provider, Senior Community Employment Services. So we really formed a strategic alliance, and our goal was to get out there, provide access to education and training, get HR professionals aware of the issue. We had as a key consultant Carlene McKay from Ageless in America, who has dedicated her work to this topic. And we had a number of successes in this region, which included Reverse Job Fair, the 50-plus hiring bonanza in September 2008. We put together a Learn to Earn forum in 2009 for both employers and job seekers. And since that time, we've been publishing materials for job seekers, as well as creating a video completed out of the Workforce Partnership for the older adult job seeker. And one of the things we have learned is that the demand for assistance far outstrips the resources in our community, especially since the Great Recession. We have, almost 250,000, somewhere in that neighborhood, of individuals 55 plus. We have a lot of people wanting to work, needing to work. We only have 50 CSEP slots for senior employment in our community. So the Thrive Project, when this was introduced to us, our director Pam Smith of our organization, myself, and other partners quickly jumped on board to participate in this planning for this initiative. And we sat on the advisory group for the Thrive Initiative, provided input, linkages to other providers in our region, and really tried to provide some support for this initiative. And I think the recommendations in terms of trying to develop this mature worker sector initiative, we totally agree with. One of the exciting things in our region is, of course, the growing need for home care. Working in the senior service arena, we're well aware of the growth in our target population. We expect to climb to more than 500,000 in older adults in this region in the very near future. And we are going to need home care aides and other health care supports, including the patient services rep, in a very significant way. We also have a large initiative involved with local health plans that are going to be responsible for integrating care for dual eligibles, Medicare and Medicaid, and they are going to be working with people who have a significant need for home care, which we expect to increase quite a bit with the introduction of this initiative in the next year. So I really think that we're going to see a big demand, and being able to have an initiative like this that has a training pipeline for older adults who can perform this kind of work and who are more likely to be trusted by other older adults to provide that personal type of service in the home. We really think that there's a direct connection there, and it also provides a concrete activity and initiative for us to put our support behind here at the Coalition. So I just wanted to share those few thoughts with you, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Ellen, thank you so much. You couldn't have said it better myself. Very on point. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jim, who is going to entertain some of the questions that came through. And if you do have questions, feel free to send them. We have a few minutes left. Thank you.
We do have just a few minutes, but we did get some interesting questions. We'll try to get as many of those as we can. If we don't get to your question, I want you to know that all of us here on the webinar have agreed to answer questions offline that don't get addressed during the session. So don't worry. If you have a question we didn't get to, we will find a way to get back to you. I'll start first with a question about the home care, and I'll address it to Susie, even though I can help to answer it maybe myself. But the question has to do with what we've heard about the appeal of direct care physicians, particularly for older adults with degrees and advanced degrees. And if older adults, have those degrees and aren't interested in direct care, what are the options for applying this model to serving them?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things we did find in the focus group that many of the older adults did have advanced degrees, and you know, we're still out of work. And I mean, again, I think the important thing to know is that home care may or may not be the right fit for every older adult. The ones that we happen to speak with were really interested in it. I think that through the sector initiative, one of the things that we've talked about is you develop good partnerships and you can learn what other possibilities might be available in terms of training or other employment options. But for some, it does make sense, and I think the screening process is just really important. And it's not a creaming. I think some people, when you hear screening, you think, oh, you're just creaming the best. And really, it's the motivation to work in this particular occupation because it is occupation-specific training.
And the employers we talked with said that #1 criteria for a good direct care worker is desire to be a direct care worker. So, so it's true that it may not appeal to everybody. I think the other piece that I would add is that this is one particular finding from one particular region, and although direct care really is an industry that is growing everywhere in the country, you know, you could equally use this process to target different occupations that might be suited better to particular populations that you're interested in serving. So that if you were interested in serving a particular portion of laid-off older adults who had certain kinds of technical skills, you can still tailor this approach to developing programs that will help them transition, maybe not even into new occupations, but just using their former occupations in new industries. So thank you for that question. That came from Mary Newton of the Atlanta Regional Commission. We also got a question from Gabriel Schneider of CALE, and it's about the data analysis. The question is, with mature worker data very hard to come by, even if it exists, how do you guide mature workers towards sectors, occupations, etc., that will be a good fit? And I think I'll just tackle this one. For our report, we did go to the local employment dynamics website to break out the composition of different sectors and subsectors by age. And it's a fairly labor-intensive process, let me tell you. But you can look at just the composition of the workforce in different segments of the economy by age, even for a particular region. We did that for San Diego. I have since learned that Economic Modeling Systems, Inc., who is a data services provider, has built-in age breakdowns within their data tools. And I'm salivating for the next time that I have to do that breakout because it's going to be so much easier. So that may be something that's helpful. But all that said, there's no substitute for, after you've gotten at least a starting place on the data, going and talking with employers and job seekers about employers, you know, where they actually have labor market, where they actually have demand and need, as opposed to what the projections from the labor market data tell you, and what they consider to be the priorities. And then job seekers, what they're interested in. So the data itself is a starting place. There are some good options now for getting that data, and I think you need to take it to the next step in designing your program. You know, I think I will ask just one more thing of, and this is a question that came very early from Michelle Talley, and Roger, maybe this is something that you can help with. The question is about what benefits are in place for employers for hiring a senior, and maybe this is something that you had experience with through your CSEP placements or through the placements that you helped to organize through this demonstration project. Were there any incentives, and what value do they bring?
Jim, I think the major one, maybe the only one we have at this point, is that we do have the ability to give out a OJE contract, you know, on the job experience, and which allows us to pay to reimburse the employer full salary for the first 30 days or a partial for 90 days. That's the biggest benefit I think that we can offer right now. After that, unless Barry or Steve can think of anything else, I can't really think of anything else that we have that we can offer besides try it before you buy it.
Well, we certainly have heard that the value of being able to see what a good worker and older worker is in advance is important for employers, and it's also for the older job seekers that we talked with, just a way of getting their foot in the door, that they really express the challenge of getting through screening processes that they felt excluded them sort of more or less arbitrarily without having a chance to demonstrate their value. That OJE, I think, seems like a way to offer value both to the job seeker and the employer. So that's a good one to flag. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately. I know there are still questions out there, so I will follow up with anyone whose question was unanswered. I want to take a moment to ask you to a small favor, and it should take between 30 seconds and maybe a minute. As you're signing off, a survey will pop up asking you for your opinion of this webinar. And as you may have heard earlier on, we take this information seriously, and we try to change our subsequent webinars to accommodate requests and suggestions. So we do hope that you will do that. It will be very, very brief. I really want to thank you for participating. I want to thank our entire panel. We just have such a great panel, and I would thank you all individually, but I'll just thank you collectively. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise.
Thank you.
And last, thank you all for participating. Look for follow-up with information related to this webinar shortly in your email. And have a great rest of your day.